Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling the book of Job, and honestly, I'm really looking forward to this one. It's a story that's captivated readers for centuries and continues to resonate with us today. And, it grapples with some of the biggest questions of human existence, like why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, it's a story that just pulls you in. It doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. It takes us right into the heart of human suffering, and the complex relationship between us humans and the divine. It's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. So let's set the scene. We're in the land of Uz, and we meet Job, a man described as blameless, upright. He feared God and shunned evil.
Right.
But he wasn't just, some kind of hermit living in a cave.
Oh, no, not at all. Job was incredibly wealthy, which back then was often seen as like a sign of God's favor. I mean, we're talking 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen. This guy was like the 1% of the ancient world.
He had it all.
Right.
And it wasn't just material wealth. He had a big family, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he was super concerned about their spiritual well-being, too.
Oh, yeah, totally. He even offered burnt offerings for his kids just in case they'd, maybe sinned without him knowing. It's like he was trying to cover all the bases, make sure they were right with God. It shows how much he valued righteousness, how important it was to him.
It's almost like an obsessive desire to be blameless in God's eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have this picture of Job, a truly righteous and prosperous guy, and then bam, the story takes a sharp turn. We're suddenly in heaven with the sons of God presenting themselves before the Lord, and Satan the accuser is there too.
Uh-huh. And this is where things get really interesting, because the Lord basically starts praising Job, presenting him as a challenge to Satan. He says, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil."
So it's like God's kind of putting Job on the spot, daring Satan to test his faith.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. And Satan, being the ultimate skeptic, he's not going to back down. He argues that Job's piety is only because of his good fortune. Take away all the blessings and he'll curse you to your face.
So we've got ourselves a cosmic wager then.
Exactly. Satan's allowed to mess with Job's possessions and family, but he can't harm Job himself. And that's when the calamities start.
One after another, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like a rapid-fire succession of disasters.
No.
The Sabeans steal his livestock, fire consumes his sheep and servants, the Chaldeans raid his camels, and then a wind collapses a house, killing all of Job's children.
Wow, that's a lot to process all at once.
It is. And it's delivered in this way that emphasizes the randomness of it all, the cruelty of fate.
To lose your children.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine that kind of grief.
It's unimaginable, and yet Job's reaction in the face of such loss is remarkable. He tears his robe, shaves his head, falls to the ground, and worships.
He worshipped.
And he worships, and he says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord."
Well, I don't even know where to start with that statement. Is it resignation? Is it something deeper?
It's complex for sure. I think it points to the depth of Job's faith. Yes, he's devastated, but there's also this acceptance of God's sovereignty at play. He knows that everything, even his life, is ultimately a gift from God, and God can take it away.
So round 1 goes to Job.
Yeah.
Satan didn't get the reaction he was hoping for.
Not at all. But he's not giving up just yet. He goes back to heaven and basically doubles down on the bet. He says if he could just afflict Job physically, then he would curse God for sure.
And God allows it.
He does. Maybe to show just how righteous Job really is. And so Satan strikes Job with these painful sores from head to toe. We're talking excruciating boils covering his entire body.
Oof, that's going to be agonizing. I mean, we've all had a paper cut or a stub toe, but this is like next level pain.
Totally. Job's in such agony, he's scraping himself with a piece of broken pottery, just sitting in the ashes, totally despairing. Even his wife tells him to just curse God and get it over with.
And Job still refuses.
He does. He says, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" He's wrestling with the very core of his beliefs. He knows he's innocent, but he's suffering more than anyone he knows. He's questioning God's justice, but he's not ready to abandon his faith.
So he's in this really tough spot. And that's when his friends show up, right?
Exactly. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They hear about what's happened to Job and travel a long way to comfort him.
And how do they react when they see him?
It's pretty dramatic. They weep, tear their robes, sprinkle dust on their heads, just like Job did earlier, and then they sit with him in silence for 7 days straight.
7 days without saying a word. That's a long time.
It shows just how much Job is suffering. Sometimes words just aren't enough. The silence becomes a way of sharing in his grief without trying to explain it or fix it.
It's like they understand that there are no easy answers.
Right. And then after 7 days, the silence is finally broken. Job, overwhelmed with pain and despair, he finally speaks. But instead of cursing God, he curses the day he was born.
What does that tell us about his state of mind at this point?
Well, his lament is just raw anguish. He longs for death, questions the meaning of his existence, wonders why he was even born.
It's heartbreaking, really.
Right.
He's not just grieving the loss of his family and possessions. He's questioning everything.
He is. And that sets the stage for the next part of the story, because now Job's friends, they're going to try to offer their explanations for his suffering.
So Job's friends are ready to weigh in with their opinions on why all this is happening to him.
And their arguments basically boil down to this suffering. It's got to be a consequence of sin. They're convinced Job must have done something really bad to deserve all this.
But that seems a little harsh, don't you think? I mean, they know Job. They've seen his righteousness firsthand.
It's interesting, isn't it? Their perspective reflects this deeply ingrained belief in a very ordered universe, where God operates on a system of rewards and punishments. Good deeds equal blessings. Wrongdoing leads to suffering.
I guess that makes sense on some level. It provides a sense of order and predictability to the world. If you follow the rules, you'll be rewarded. Break them and you'll suffer the consequences.
Makes sense in theory. But as Job's story shows, life is rarely that straightforward. Suffering can be random, unfair. And it can hit anyone, even the most righteous among us.
And Job, he's not buying it.
Yeah.
He vehemently denies his friend's accusations.
Absolutely. He knows he's innocent, and he's not afraid to stand up for himself.
It's like he's saying, hold on a minute, I haven't done anything to deserve this.
Exactly. He argues passionately that his suffering is totally undeserved. He even goes so far as to question God's justice, demanding an explanation for his plight.
Wow. To challenge God like that when you're going through so much pain, that takes some serious guts.
It does. And it's this willingness to question, to grapple with the divine, that makes Job such a compelling and relatable character. He's not just passively accepting his fate, he's actively engaged in a struggle for understanding.
He's pushing back against the easy answers.
He is. And so the dialogue between Job and his friends goes on for chapters. They go back and forth, each presenting their arguments and counter-arguments. It's like a theological debate full of passionate pleas and intricate reasoning.
And where does all this debate lead them?
Well, as the debate goes on, we start to see the limits of human understanding. Job's friends, despite their good intentions, they just can't grasp the mystery of his suffering. They cling to their preconceived ideas about God's justice, even when those ideas are contradicted by Job's experience.
They're trying to force his experience into a box that doesn't quite fit.
They are. And Job, while he maintains his innocence, he's struggling to reconcile his suffering with his faith in a just and loving God.
It's like his faith is being tested to its absolute limit.
It is. His faith is shaken, but it doesn't break. He keeps wrestling with God, even when God seems silent or absent.
And then a new character enters the scene, Elihu, a younger man who's been quietly listening to this whole exchange.
Right. Elihu steps in, and he basically criticizes both Job and his friends. He says they're all missing the point. They're trying to understand something that's beyond human comprehension.
So he's saying we shouldn't try to explain suffering or try to impose our limited understanding on God's actions.
Yeah, he suggests that God is just too vast, too complex for us to fully grasp. And then he brings up this interesting idea that suffering might be a form of divine discipline.
Okay, so not just punishment for sin, but something more nuanced than that.
Exactly. He's suggesting that God might use hardship to refine us, to teach us valuable lessons, to draw us closer to him.
It's a different way of looking at suffering, not just as something to be avoided or explained away, but as something that can have a purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately clear.
Right, and it shifts the focus from earning rewards or avoiding punishments to the idea of spiritual growth and transformation.
So we've heard from Job's friends, we've heard from Elihu, but the big question still remains unanswered. Why is Job suffering? And that's when God himself decides to enter the conversation. And he doesn't do it subtly. He appears in a whirlwind.
This is it. The climax of the story. God finally breaks the silence and speaks directly to Job.
And what does he say? Does he explain everything? Apologize for the pain he's allowed Job to endure?
He doesn't give Job the answers he's been searching for. Instead, he challenges Job with a series of questions. Questions that force Job to consider the vastness and complexity of creation.
What kind of questions?
Well, for example, he asks, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy?"
Whoa. Those are some powerful images. It's like God's trying to show Job just how small he is in comparison to the grand scheme of things.
It's more than that, I think. It's not just about humbling Job. It's about expanding his perspective, helping him to see the bigger picture.
He's saying, look at the wonders I've created. Look at the mysteries of the universe. You're just a small part of something much greater than yourself.
And when you see it from that perspective, suffering takes on a different meaning. It's not just about sin and punishment. It's a thread woven into the fabric of existence, a part of the larger mystery that we may never fully understand.
So God isn't giving Job a simple explanation. He's offering him a new way of seeing the world.
Exactly. And in the face of God's overwhelming power and majesty, Job is humbled. He recognizes that he can't possibly understand everything, and he surrenders to the mystery of God's ways.
In his humility, he says, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes.
It's a powerful moment of transformation. He's not repenting for specific sins, but for presuming to grasp God's ways. He's acknowledging that human knowledge has its limits and embracing the mystery of faith.
And how does God respond to this change in Job?
He rebukes Job's friends for their judgmental accusations, and then he gives Job back everything and more. He doubles his wealth, blesses him with new children, and grants him a long and fulfilling life.
It's like a cosmic reset button, a second chance.
It really is. It highlights God's mercy and grace, reminding us that even after the worst suffering, there's always hope for healing, renewal, and abundance.
But it's more than just material possessions. Job gains a deeper understanding of his relationship with God. He comes out of this with his faith not just intact, but maybe even stronger.
That's an important takeaway. Job's story isn't just about enduring hardship. It's about the evolution of faith. It's about coming to a new understanding of God, of yourself, and of what it means to truly believe.
It makes you think about those times in your own life when you face those impossible challenges, when you start questioning everything you thought you knew about God and about the world.
Absolutely. Job's story gives us a framework for how to navigate those difficult times. It reminds us that it's okay to question, to doubt, to wrestle with those big questions about faith. Authentic faith isn't about blind acceptance or easy answers. It's about having that honest and sometimes messy conversation with the divine. And realizing that sometimes we just won't get the answers we're looking for. We may never understand why we go through certain things. Sometimes all we can do is acknowledge the mystery of God's plan and trust that He's working for our good, even when we can't see it.
And that kind of trust requires a deep humility, a willingness to let go of the need to control everything and to embrace the limits of our human perspective.
What about Job's friends, though? They were so sure they had it all figured out. They thought Job must have sinned to deserve his fate.
Their mistake wasn't just their theological viewpoint, it was their lack of empathy. They were so focused on trying to fit Job's experience into their own narrow worldview that they completely missed the depth of his pain and the complexity of his situation.
It's a reminder for all of us that when we see someone struggling, it's easy to fall into the trap of judging them or offering simplistic solutions.
Instead, we should try to approach them with humility, compassion, and an open mind. Sometimes the most helpful thing we can do is just be present with them in their pain, acknowledge their suffering without trying to explain it away. Job's story is a powerful reminder that suffering is a universal human experience. We all face loss, disappointment, illness, heartbreak at some point. But it doesn't have to be the end of our story.
There's always hope for healing, for growth, for transformation. Even in the darkest times, we can find comfort in knowing that we're not alone. We have a God who understands our pain and walks with us every step of the way.
This deep dive into the book of Job has really been something else. It's a story about the complexity of faith, the mystery of suffering, and ultimately the enduring power of hope. Even if we don't always find the answers we're looking for, we can find strength, comfort, and guidance in this ancient and timeless tale. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.